Diversity is one of the most widely discussed topics in our industry today. And let's be clear, when the FDA is talking about diversity action plans, you do realize they're primarily concerned with redheads from the northeast of England, right? No, of course not. But while I'm not an expert in diversity, I am an expert in localization. And what are diversity initiatives and localization, if not tools, to help make sure that all patients have a voice everywhere? Having grown up with a speech impediment, having a voice is something that's really important to me. And I know that you all here today want to ensure that all your patients have their voices heard. However, when I speak to study teams, the very first thing they say to me is that localization takes too long. And when timelines on a study become a concern, the scope shrinks. Languages and voices are removed. But it's never your mainstream languages that you might expect to be in your study. It's often the languages which are considered to be unofficial in a given country, or perhaps even entire countries like India or those in Africa. The reality is that patients today around the world are missing out on life-changing opportunities in trials because localization takes too long. How do we make sure that our trials work across geographic and language barriers? How do we make sure we localize better? Well, the first thing to realize is that this is just not down to solely the translation vendors. That's like putting the entire burden of your process on the bricklayer for the success of your entire building project. We all have a role to play to reduce the burden of translation on our trials, on our sites, and on our patients. Technology vendors, consider this. If there are 10 countries in a study, your English-speaking population can represent as little as 10 to 20% of the intended patient population. Therefore, ensuring that we have easily localizable platforms removes some of the burden and some of the difficulties in making sure that we can engage with all the potential patients in our studies. Here's some examples. An issue we still see across the industry today is character corruption in different alphabets and different writing systems. Think Indian languages. Yet, if patients in other countries like India can buy devices that will display their languages perfectly, why as an industry do we still struggle to deploy these languages successfully in our trials in a timely manner? Secondly, a large portion of the localization process is moving translated text from one format to another, importing it into a system and proofreading that output. And who better to innovate this part of the process than technology vendors, who both build these platforms and who are experts in the technology? And this is the perfect use case of AI in the localization process. The team I've been working with at YPrime Labs have developed a tool that automates the moving of these existing translations into the electronic formats. Right now, this is something done by humans, manually, sentence by sentence. And it's errors in manual processes like this which lead to the long localization timelines that I'm talking about. Let's talk more now about other groups that are in the process. Sponsors. Something you can do to help this process is consider proactively translating your content into the new languages that you need. Then, what you have is content and translations readily available, and you've invested in the future success of your trials when you do engage with more diverse language populations. And of course, to our translation vendor friends, when we are thinking about our localization process, we often think to guidelines like the ISPO guidelines. Next year, in March, they will turn 20 years old. Of course, they've been reviewed and updated in that process. However, the original linguistic validation methodology, which we still use today, was written before the iPhone was invented, before AI and large language models were readily available. And so let's start talking as an industry about how we start innovating this process. Let's revolutionize the translation process and make sure that all of these technologies are helping our processes and that localization is no longer a rate-limiting factor in the translation work that we do, in the studies that we put out there, in the life-changing work that we do. What should I take away from this? Localization has to improve to boost diversity in our trials, whether it be sponsors with proactive translations, whether it be technology providers ensuring that they have quick and easily localizable platforms, whether it be translation vendors innovating that process and using all the tools available to them to really bring translation into the 21st century. Just know we all have a role to play in this process. So go away after today and ask yourself this: what am I doing to make sure that every patient has a voice everywhere? Thank you.